Do you find yourself wanting to run heavy armor and OPR but really don't want to sit there holding right click with a sword and shield? Well, this build might just be the one for you. As always, before we fully get into today's video, I do just want to say if this video helps you out, or if you just like it, please drop it a like. It really helps me out a lot. And if you want to see more content like this, including more build videos, loot videos, stuff like that, definitely subscribe to the channel so you know when those videos go up. I also stream throughout the week over on Twitch as well as YouTube, so definitely stop by a stream, say hello, lurk, anything like that. We would love to have you. But let's get into today's video. Alright, as always, we are going to get started by looking at the gear, and as you can see, we are in full heavy armor, and these first three pieces are going to have the exact same perks, the health, grit ward, and invigorated, and what you're going to find in all of my gear is I have full grit ward, mostly full health, minus one piece of armor. But with the invigorated perk, this is one where I would say it's not 100% necessary. If you do find that you're going to get more value out of like a conditioning or just generally a different perk, definitely go that route if you feel like that's going to benefit you more. But what I have found is with the disease, exhaust, and rend, those are the three debuffs that really hurt me the most as a heavy armor. So having that reduction in the base duration of those abilities is really, really nice. So I like running this, but definitely if you find that there's some other defensive perks that work better, definitely go that route, because obviously what I find might work for me may not work for you. So definitely, explore some different areas of what might work for perks. But this might be a good starting point for you. For the pants and the boots, we are running the syncretic gear, and some of you may have been in stream when I might have spent a few too many hours trying to farm the pants, and then off stream I might have pulled them in like 5 to 10 minutes, but I did end up getting them, and thank you very much for those who did hang out that day, because it was very aggravating not pulling the pants and pulling just about every other syncretic piece of armor and weapon in the meantime. But what I did is I ended up pulling Nullifying Oblivion on my pants, because then we can remove those limited duration buffs from enemies. And then we also get a cooldown reduction on Nullifying Oblivion as well by 10% by having it on the armor. So really, really good perk to have for this build specifically. For the boots, pretty straightforward. Health, grit ward, / conditioning. Health just to obviously increase that max health. Grit ward just to go with the other stacks. And then / conditioning, because that is just really nice to have when you're fighting other melees, especially when it's a great sword that's just landing heavy attack after heavy attack. Might as well reduce some of that damage taken. For our one and only artifact on this build, it is the Michael Shield. I have never actually ran this shield until now, and it is absolutely fantastic. I highly recommend it if you're doing something similar to this build. And what is special about it is you get the refreshing cleanse. So you do get the cooldown reduction by 5%, but on block you actually lose one debuff. So when I was talking about the invigorated not being 100% necessary depending on you as a player, you are able to remove those debuffs, but what I find is when you're in a big clump, you have those debuffs continually just coming back. So even though you can block and block and block, you can remove them, but then a lot of them will come back. So just shortening the time is kind of nice to have, but definitely use it at your discretion as far as what you think works for you. And then for the last perk of what I put on there was Enchanted Ward, which has been working really well. Just kind of reduces that damage from the light and heavies. Stack that with the Grit Ward, and light and heavy attacks just do significantly less damage to me. The other thing too is as you're blocking to remove those debuffs, you heal for 3% base health every 3 seconds when you block an attack, and then you also get a 30% empower. So even though we are going to be running very high con on this build, you actually do get the empowerment, and you can do a decent amount of damage if you block and then attack immediately afterwards. It does work pretty well, and I will say I've been impressed at times with the damage output for how little strength we have on the build. For the weapons, I crafted 2 weapons for this, the Void and the Flail, and the Void Gauntlet came out absolutely perfect for me. So we have the Putrefying Scream, Plague Crit, and Keen. Now, we are not running any int and only 50 focus. We'll get into the attributes and kind of talk about that in a little bit. But with the focus and the lack of int, we just don't do much damage with the Void Gauntlet, so it's not really designed for that. It is all about the utility completely. So the Putrefying Scream, Plague Crits obviously is really, really big, because that is a lot of disease, especially if you crit with the Scream. They are extremely diseased, especially if it's a healer. Their outgoing healing is also reduced by a bunch, so it is a fantastic Void Gauntlet. If you can get your hands on one, I definitely recommend it. Oh, and for the gem, because we're not really doing any damage, it doesn't really matter as much. I went for an emerald just because I guess you get, you know, the 16% damage and 5% healing or whatever, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. You could put an opal or really whatever you think you need, but I wouldn't stress too much over the gem for that. For the Flail, I crafted this as well with Burdening Smite and Plague Strikes, and it did roll with Keen, which wasn't too bad, but the Burdening Smite is an ability that doesn't necessarily feel like it's doing a whole lot, but when I tested it in some duels, it's actually like crazy how you can extend the cooldown of an ability that's an active cooldown at the time for that player. So you can really throw off the timing of some people. They might have a certain flow, a certain rotation that they go for. And by utilizing this ability and this perk, you can actually really throw them off. Now with the Plague Strikes, I really like Plague Strikes on a Flail because I run the Trip ability, which again, we'll get into the mastery later. And with the Trip ability, when you trip them, that follow-up is a heavy attack and it will actually apply the disease. On top of that, as you're applying heavy attack after heavy attack, you will continually renew that disease. So it says 8 seconds. It's actually a little bit longer than that, but with the 8 seconds, it'll just refresh it. So let's say it's down to like 3 seconds. You hit him with another heavy, jumps back up to the 8. So really nice to have. This Flail has just been working great for me. So I do highly recommend, if you're going to be just sitting on point like I'm doing, just swinging away, Burdening Smite with Plague Strikes, fantastic. And then as far as the gem goes, I did put a Jasper in there because we are blocking, we're taking damage. We just get, you know, a few extra stacks of damage, and it's been working just fine for me, but we are not a main damage dealer, so I wouldn't worry as much about like getting maximum damage out of this build. It really is a utility build. On to the jewelry. You guys can probably guess what my amulet is. It is my Health Divine Thrust Protection, the amulet that I wear for just about every single build out there, and it works fantastic for me. I don't really change it up. If you want to get your own but don't want to craft one or buy it from the trading post, go out and farm the Tango Vine amulet and then just level it up with your chromatic seals and a matrix, and you can have the exact amulet that I have. I crafted this at the very start of the season. Or actually the very start of the expansion, I mean, and I have not really put it down since. It goes on just about every single build because thrust protection is what I need. Thrust damage is what kills me all the time in OPR, and I just always have to run it because, yeah, thrust, I hate thrust damage when it's hitting me. So that's what I do. Definitely play around with whatever amulet you think is best, but obviously the Health Divine I really like as a heavy armor especially, and then you can throw whatever protection you want on there. For the ring, this is a very important piece of the puzzle. Hardy Infected Purifying Heart. The Hardy just gives us a little extra stam, which I know with heavy armor, the dodges are 55, but having a little bit of extra stam as a heavy, especially with a shield, is not all that bad. Just gives a little bit more blocking potential, and just more stam is nice. I really like it. The Infected increases the base duration of diseases by 32%. So like when I was talking about the 8 seconds on the Plague Strikes, we do get to increase that time by 32%. And then actually with our Flail build, we can increase that time even further past the 32%. So we'll get into the mastery later and talk about that. And then with the Purifying Heart, it's really nice because again, if we are on the point and we're just, you know, fighting, swinging away, we have all boatloads of debuffs. We can just pop our heart rune, remove all of them no matter what heart rune you're running, and it'll remove all those debuffs and you are good to go. On the earring, I have Refreshing Toast, Nimble, Fortifying Toast. I was running the Endless Thirst, but honestly, having the potions take that long to come back, I really didn't like. Yes, they were stronger. When I tested it though, like the regen pots weren't that much stronger. It was maybe like an extra 100 something HP per tick from that. And with the health pot, you do get an extra 1,000 or so HP back, but I just wanted to get my potions back a little bit quicker. So I ended up dropping that. And then I also wanted to make sure I had the nimble because having the extra stam regeneration as a heavy armor is super nice. So this is what I've been running. It's not a 700, but honestly, it works just fine for me. But you know, if you find the Endless Thirst or any other of the jewelry artifacts work for you, then definitely go with it. But this is what works for me. It works really good. So that is what we're looking at for the gear. For the heart rune, definitely you have some options. We have Stone Form. Stone Form is a fairly obvious one for a heavy armor especially. Just gives us that extra fortify and all that. It allows you to get away from the crowd control debuffs. So I go with Stone Form. The other options that I would maybe recommend would be Vines. So with the Vines, you do get a reduction in your stamina regeneration by 50% for 5 seconds, but because we're running Purifying Heart, it should purify that, so you actually don't get that. So Vines also wouldn't be a bad one. Otherwise, the other one that I'm highly recommending to try, and I need to try it myself, I actually haven't even tried it, is the Firestorm, because when you remove the debuffs with your Purifying Heart, it will not remove the dots. So any burns or bleeds and stuff like that, it doesn't seem to remove those because it doesn't consider them as debuffs, it considers them as dots. So if you utilize it with the Firestorm, you can actually remove all of it. So you can remove all your debuffs and all your dots with just one heart rune. So I might start trying to run that and see how it works, because you also are applying a weaken if you're running the Stalwart one. So something to think about. You get the Enfeebling Storm, Cleansing Storm. Just, try out different heart runes and see what works for you. And if you do find that one works absolutely like the best for you, definitely let me know down in the comments so I can try it out myself. But that is what we are looking at for the gear. Next, we're going to take a look over at the attributes and then the mastery. Taking a look over at the attributes here, you can see we have a fairly straightforward layout, but let's get into why I'm kind of doing it the way I am. So with all of our Grit Ward, I also wanted to hit 350 con, so then we can get the extra 10% damage reduction while we have active Grit, on top of the 300, which gives our basic melee attacks Grit as well. So as we're swinging, we have the 5 stacks of Grit Ward on top of having the 10% damage reduction while we have active Grit, so we take significantly less damage, and we get the Grit with our Flail, so we're just swinging away, left click and heavy attack and all of that. Works really, really well. I do take a roasted rabbit food, so then that is a 48 con food. That's what gets me up to the 350. I like to run the 50 focus for one. Both Flail and Void Gauntlet do technically utilize focus, so having the extra incoming healing is nice on top of the ability cooldown reduction. And then everything else into strength. So we don't do a ton of damage, like I said, but being that we also are running the Michael shield, we get a 30% increase in damage from the empowerment. So it is something where like we can do decent damage, but that's not really the goal of this build. We are not one that's going to be going out, getting kills, all that. We are going to be getting assists. Treat assists like they are kills with this build, because when you start actually utilizing it for assists and start really trying to play into, I'm going to like set up this play for our other bruisers or DPS to just, get a lot of value out of it. It's crazy. You'll get tons of assists with this build, and it feels really, really good to just see like a group of bruisers that you go up, scream, circle, trip, do everything you have in your power, and to watch them all just fall over is so satisfying. So definitely something where I do highly recommend at least running the 350 con, so then you get all that damage reduction and you can just stay on the point without having to right click to stay tanky. You can just keep swinging. Works really, really well. And like I said, that focus at least helps a little bit on the, Flail and Void Gauntlet, but overall you are not going to be a major damage dealer, just absolutely annoying on the point, applying debuffs and removing their buffs with your Nullifying Oblivion. But next, let's get into the builds, because the Flail build itself is very specific and I want to get into it and show you exactly why I have it the way I do. All right, to get us started with the mastery, let's take a look at the Void Gauntlet first, because this is fairly straightforward. Essentially, all I wanted was Scream, Circle, Orb. The Orb is just to apply a slow as well as push us to get our Glimpse of the Void. Those of you who know when I run Void Gauntlet, a lot of times I love Glimpse of the Void. And what that does is it allows us to get all of our cooldowns back. So a lot of times I'll do like a Scream, Circle, maybe an Orb afterwards, and then a heavy attack with my Void. And that heavy attack is not necessarily to do the damage, but it is to trigger that cooldown reduction. And all of a sudden, if you get enough stacks of the Void Essence, once you land that heavy attack, you will have all of your cooldowns back, meaning you get to Scream again, Circle, all of that. So any buffs they've gotten in the meantime, you get to remove those again with your Nullifying Oblivion. So like I said, this is pretty straightforward. You can definitely just copy this if you'd like. Again, we're not doing any damage really with our Void Gauntlet anyways. I just had to throw some perks on here just to be able to get Glimpse of the Void. But it's really about the abilities. And then the one passive perk that I will highly recommend is the Refreshing Frailty, which gives you a 5% cooldown reduction on all abilities when successfully hitting enemies afflicted by 3 or more debuff stacks. these stacks can be from different debuffs. So it's something to really think about because there are so many debuffs in this game that are being applied, especially in a clump fight, that you will get your damage or your cooldown reduction from that. Even if you're not doing much damage, again, the Void Gauntlet is your utility weapon. Well, both of them are, but the main use of the Void is just the utility of it. So cooldown reduction is really, really big. And that's why if I pair this with the Glimpse of the Void, because this Glimpse of the Void does have a 15-second cooldown, once we use Glimpse of the Void, then we can utilize the Refreshing Frailty to get our cooldowns back again, fairly quickly. So this build works really, really well. Again, not damage focused. It's mainly just cooldown focused, so we can just get those Scream circles back that much faster. All right, next, let's take a look over at the Flail. So this is where we start to get a lot more specific. So obviously we're running Smite all the way down. With the Kite Shield, we will stagger targets, but damage is reduced by 90%. So we do stagger with it, and the stagger is actually really, really nice. So that is something to think about, the fact that we're running the Kite Shield, the Michael Kite Shield. We can stagger them. I don't really care about getting the Fortify out of that because the stagger is really, really nice, and it has really thrown some people off. And then with this, it just allows us to trigger some lifesteal for our teammates. So I do really like that. It does, apply the weakening and all that as well. But the main thing is the lifesteal. It's just to benefit our team and stuff. So I did end up going with that. And then for the next ability, we have the Eruption. So with the Eruption, this is where, when I was talking about how we can extend the duration of our disease and debuffs past that 32% that we get from our ring, it is because once we get down to this debilitating extension, the follow-up attack extends the duration of all debilitate status effects, which is rend, weaken, exhaust, and disease on the target by 30%. So if we take our infected ring, which is a 32% increase in disease, and we stack this on top of that, that is now a 62% increase to that disease duration. So if you're chasing a healer or trying to push a healer, or really anyone for that matter, and you get that follow-up attack to hit them, they are now diseased for a very long time. So this is very, very, very important for this build. If you're going to run it the same as I do, make sure that you go down to this perk and have that. I don't go for the Supportive Blessing because we're not trying to heal or anything like that. It is strictly just to extend the duration of our disease because we are just a ball of disease when we're on the point. So I do highly, highly, highly recommend going with this. For the third ability, as I said earlier, we are running Trip. So with the follow-up attack, that is a heavy attack that will apply the disease with it. So really, really good to have, especially when you're in a clump and you can trip a bunch of people. Even if they don't fall down, that follow-up heavy is still going to hit them and they will be diseased. From there, you can see I didn't go with either of the ultimates here. We just kind of started going around with different abilities to benefit the team or to debuff the enemy. So we did Leader of the Pack. It just kind of increases the damage dealt for our team. The Spiky Impairment, so we actually can apply the impairment as long as we are above 90% health if we are blocking them or being hit. So that is something that's really nice, especially if we're in like a sacred ground with a beacon on top of that, even better yet. We're applying that impairment to people just by literally taking damage or blocking. So it is fantastic. I do highly recommend it. Happy Flails, so hitting a target with a basic attack within 3 seconds of using ability will inflict exhaust. So we can actually inflict the exhaust. So let's say we do an Arcane Smite and then a Trip, and then we smack them, and then we hit them with the Arcane Eruption. Then with the debilitating extension, we can actually extend the time of the exhaust from this by quite a bit, by 30%. So it is something to think about. I like it for the PvP side of things. For PvE, I don't really like running this. Sometimes I just accidentally leave it on because it's not as big of a deal, but for PvP, it is fantastic. And then with the cooldown reduction, so we actually get a 5% cooldown reduction when dodging an attack, which when we're on the point, just, getting swung at and stuff as we dodge, we get a 5% cooldown reduction. So it is something that is really nice to have an extra cooldown reduction for the build because we don't have, refreshing move or anything like that. So I really like having this just to have a little bit more cooldown reduction so we can get those abilities back that much quicker. On the right tree, we did go with the Vital Suppressant, so while at or above 50% health, we get a reduction in damage taken by 4%, and then while we're below 50%, we reduce the attacker's stam damage dealt by blocking by 10%. So when we're kind of lower in health and we're blocking, we just don't take as much stam, so with the Kite Shield, it's really, really nice to have that, so I do highly recommend going that route. Reductive superiority, so with the Kite Shield, decrease base duration of damage over time and debilitating effects on player by 10%. Really, really nice, because again, we talked about the invigorated and just getting rid of, the rend, exhaust, all that stuff. So this just adds to that. The Kite Shield fits perfectly with this build because of that. I went with the mitigated protection as well. So in heavy armor, absorb 5% absorption at full health, increasing to a max of 20% mitigation as health decreases. So really, really nice to have. We gain a 3-second tracking status effect. Every blocked hit extends the duration of the status effect by 3 seconds to a max of 9 seconds. And while the effect is active, gain variable damage absorption based on the current health percent and equip load. So it is equip load based rather than shield based. So I went with it just for the mitigation there. And then I always go with the reinforced vitality. Really, no matter what build I go with for Flail, I always have this because it just increases our base or our max health by 25% of our physical armor rating, which with our, Flail and shield, with our heavy armor, that increases quite a bit because heavy armor, we just have more armor. So it's just increasing that max health quite a bit while our Flail is out. And honestly, our Flail is out the majority of the time because, again, the Void Gauntlet is not going to be there for damage. It's just use those abilities, switch back to Flail. So this is the build. It is very specific. This is how I run it, and I think most of it should make sense. If you do change some of these abilities or perks, definitely let me know in the comments because I'm always interested in what you guys are running and what works for you because, again, playstyles are different. Everyone just enjoys different things or, different aspects of certain things within the game, and that's what makes New World so much fun because you can play it however you want, different builds, different perks, and still make it work for you and how you like to play. That is the build itself, but next let's take a look at some gameplay of this build in action. I have some OPR footage, so definitely enjoy some footage of this build. This build has been so much fun for me. I have absolutely been loving it. At first, I honestly didn't feel like it was doing a whole lot until I started really paying attention to what was happening in the matches, seeing big groups getting screamed, circled, cooldowns extended, disease extended, all of that has been fantastic. It has been so much fun. Those of you who have been in stream watching me play it can definitely see that I actually really enjoy this build. And hopefully it works for you, or maybe you can tweak it to make it work better for you, because everyone does have a different play style. But it has been very fun, and I think as far as the team effort goes, it is fantastic, and a lot of your fellow bruisers will absolutely love you being on the point with them. But that is going to do it for today's video, so until next time, I'll see you guys later.